Murder. Why do people do it? There are the people who seem like they do it randomly. Then there are the other killers that seem to plot and plan, killing complete strangers. You know, I could almost, but not really, slightly understand the person that kills someone they know. You know, some switch goes off where they go from sane to some version of insanity. But how do you explain killing strangers? I don't know. But I think our guest is going to provide us with a lot of good insights. His name's Bob Mladinich. He has been on the New York City police force he was on the New York City police force for many years. In fact, he won Cop of the Year one of those years. He was a detective, second grade, which is a pretty impressive feat if you understand how any of that ranking goes. He's also written some books that are just plain jaw-droppingly captivating, including interviewing Joel Rifkin, who he went to journalism school with, and then later for the New York City Police Department interviewed. He wrote quite a few other ones too. We're going to talk about them all, and we're going to get into this as much as we can because this is going to go fast. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Bob, you still do security now. You do all kinds of testifying, law enforcement work, helping people understand the legal issues that go into crime, the criminal mind, murder. I don't even know where to start. I'm truly speechless because I just don't understand murder.
Murder is probably it seems like one of the easiest concepts in the world, but it's probably one of the most misunderstood crimes in the world. You spoke about, crimes of passion. That's usually where people know each other. Maybe there's some partner dispute or partner abuse. That's somewhat understandable. But a guy like Joel Rifkin, who came from a seemingly, normal, two-parent suburban home, very happy upbringing, very good relationship, very positive relationship with his mother. How he turned to murder, that's a little bit more of a mystery.
Now, you went to school together at one point, and then you got to interview him later. Can you give us that background?
Back in the late 1970s, I was attending the State University of New York at Brockport, which is way up by between Buffalo and Rochester. It's very cold up there. And I was in the journalism department. I was in my senior year, and I had met this publisher of a boxing magazine, which is now defunct. And boxing, back then was much bigger than it is now. It was a kind of a big deal in upstate New York. They had a couple of local attractions up there. So I became sort of like the upstate correspondent for this magazine. And my very first assignment, I was still a student. So the fact that I was getting a paid assignment was a very big deal, even though it was probably like $150 or $200. But
it's
it was
cash.
It's a big deal.
That's big.
When all of your classmates, you're going out and you're actually getting your very first paid assignment. But I had told this publisher that I could write or I could take photographs as well as I could write. And
so you could do two jobs.
Right. So he says, oh, great, bring 4 or 5 photos to go along with your 2-page spread that's going to be in the next issue of the magazine. So now I went into complete panic mode because back then in the late 1970s, there weren't any phone cameras. I don't even know if there were Instamatics yet. So you really had to know the mechanics of a camera to take good pictures, especially with when there's fast action, like in boxing. You really had to know what you were doing with a camera. So in my panic, I didn't want to lose this assignment. I went to the journalism department where I knew everybody because I had been involved with them for 3 or 4 years already. And I told them my situation. I said, can you call somebody in your photography club? They had this very good photography club up there. I never really got to know the people in there, because I didn't really have that much of an interest in photography, even though, oddly enough, my father was a camera fanatic and had a dark room in the house, which was kind of unusual. But they said, sure, we have just a guy. And they called this fellow, and within a half an hour, because we were going to be going to the fight later that evening, this is like 3 or 4 hours before fight time. And next thing I know, out of the blue comes this like long-haired, shaggy kid, rumpled clothing. He's got all these straps and cameras hanging off of his shoulders and his neck. And he says, "I'm ready to go." And to make a long story short, we drove into Rochester.
Was that Joel Rifkin?
That was Joel Rifkin. He was a couple of years younger than me, so I had not really met him in the curriculum. I think I was in my last year. So we got to know each other on the way to Rochester. He was as excited as I was to be getting this first paid assignment. We spoke a lot about our future goals and ambitions, which I was very impressed with his creativity and some of the things he had in mind for his future. And that was what made him so memorable to me, why he stuck out of my mind so many years later. And one of the things that he told me was that he was kind of bored with college. He just transferred up there from Nassau Community College on Long Island. He had gone there for 2 years. He was kind of bored, and he wanted to get out in the world and do his own thing. He wanted to open up a photo studio. And, that's common. I'm sure everybody says things like that. But what stuck out to me was the fact that he said he wanted to learn how to parachute, because one of the services that he wanted to offer was to, jump out of a plane with a couple that were going to be getting married. And while they were reciting their vows in the air, he was going to photograph this whole thing and create a photographic record. So you got to remember, back in 1979, there were no real portable video cameras.
Right.
I mean, this is like ancient
You're talking about
times.
lugging a lot of equipment up in the sky to imagine something like that.
And this is a 22-year-old kid. That's 20. Probably I was probably 22. He was probably 20. And just to have that kind of forethought and thinking, I was like, wow, this kid is pretty sharp, and he's really ambitious.
So that's like 1979.
Yes.
Now, let's fast forward into the future of history. You're working in the police department, and Joel Rifkin is in jail. Has he been convicted at this point, or what's
No. We just have to slow down a little bit, because there's some important things.
I'm not good at slowing down.
Yeah. I wound up graduating shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Joel did not come back for the spring semester, and I graduated the end of the spring semester. So I kind of envisioned him as, he dropped out because he had told me he was bored. Before we get that far. What happened at this boxing match was there was a riot after the main event. And because the local guy had won the fight, but he really didn't deserve it. And even though he was the big favorite, the people went berserk. And it was a really, really dangerous full-scale riot. And Joel was like under the table like this, and he was firing away with his camera. And we wound up going to these 2 city daily newspapers. And he sold quite a few of his photos. So this was a really big formative experience for the both of us. Not only did I get to do my article, he got a couple of photos in the magazine, but he also sold photos to the 2 daily newspapers. And it was all the excitement with 3 or 4 in the morning. They're developing the film. They're looking at it with a little glass. They're going, oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. So it was a really, really exciting experience for the both of us. So I was I was very disappointed when I found out that he dropped out. He didn't come back for the next semester. So I graduate. I moved to Manhattan immediately. This is like December 1980. And or the spring of 1980. And I'm envisioning, as I'm struggling, trying to get a job, I want to work for a major daily, I didn't want to go work for like a small local paper. And I'm not really having much luck. So 2 or 3 years later, I joined the police department, and I kind of view myself as a civil service sellout. I really wasn't happy with my decision. I thought I should have, like an actor, maybe I should have stuck it out a little longer. I was working for some like neighborhood newspapers, but I really wasn't making a living. So during all this time, I'm imagining that Joel, because he was so creative and he really was such a star under pressure, I'm imagining that he dropped out because he got some great offers somewhere, and he's working for Life magazine or National Geographic or some, he's like this in-demand freelancer. So he was always, as I patrolled, Washington Heights and the South Bronx, he would always pop into my head as the guy that was probably still fulfilling his dream or aiming to fulfill his dream. So he would pop into my head like on a regular basis. So you can only imagine when 12 years later, and I'm still feeling like I sort of, gave up too soon on my journalistic ambitions when I hear that this guy is a serial killer.
Now, so that's like 1990?
He was arrested in 1992. And we had.
Do you know how retroactively they thought his first? Because it was like 17 murders, right?
Joel's first murder was committed, I believe, in 1987 and 1988.
Wow.
So
they were relatively close in time together.
He was convicted, and he admitted to and was convicted of killing 17 victims over the course of like 3.5 years.
Wow. I have so many questions right now. One, how did that make you feel? I got to start there. We rely on our gut instinct for so many things, our perceptions, how we gather thoughts and feelings that, merge and create these ways we see the world. That had to feel like a freaking gut punch. Like one of the hardest punches you took, and you were a pro boxer. Well, I cannot imagine.
It's funny you mention that about it being a gut punch because I always trusted my gut. I was always a firm believer in trusting my gut. And my gut was usually, throughout my life, it's been right most of the time. It couldn't have been more wrong than in my,
Oh, I've got goosebumps thinking about this.
What I expected, my expectations of what Joel's career was like. So after he gets arrested, and his name was not announced for a couple of days. But once his name was announced, I literally, I was in like a semi-shock.
I would bet.
And I was so...
And you were on the police force about 10 years at that point?
I was on the police force for about 10 years at that point. Yeah. I was a detective at that point. And I so much wanted to insert myself somehow into the investigation. I wanted to tell people what I knew, or I wanted to.
What state was he arrested in?
New York.
Oh, it was New York.
Nassau County.
Oh, it was Nassau County. I thought it was New York or New Jersey. I didn't remember. Yeah.
But, I was wary. I was wary of inserting myself or even letting anybody know that I knew him. Knowing what I know today and being a lot more mature and, being more of a veteran and knowing, what you could say, what you couldn't say, I would have no issue telling the detectives that were involved in the case, yes, I knew him, maybe I can help. But I really didn't. I thought it would be bad form to get involved in any way. So I kind of just, put it to the side. And then a couple of years later, I think he went to trial for one case and he wound up pleading guilty to a lot of others. He gets 200 and something years in jail. And he still crosses my mind every now and then, during this period. And then I see him being interviewed in probably 1997, maybe 1998. He's being interviewed on national TV. And he's touting this manifesto, this 23-page manifesto called the Aloha House. And I believe Aloha means sanctuary in Hebrew, and Joel was Jewish. And this Aloha House is something created by him. It's a place where women on the street, women that are having drug issues, maybe unwanted pregnancies, maybe their parents don't want them. It's a house they can go to and they can learn not only life skills, but they can also learn, if they're on the street, how to protect themselves from wolves in sheep's clothing like Joel. So Joel is touting this as his give back. And he seemed kind of sincere, but I said, how can he be sincere? It's, it's got to be BS. But this is what made me think there was some semi-sincerity in what he was saying. The interviewer then asks him if he feels any remorse for what he did, for the families of the people he killed, for the people he actually killed. Does he feel any remorse whatsoever? And he said no. And that really struck me, because I've sat across from murderers, I've sat across from, sex offenders, and they all say the same thing. If I could take that time back, if I really regret it, I'm so sorry for what I did. But he said, no, I don't feel bad. I want to. I wish I could, but I can't. And I don't understand why I can't, because I really don't consider myself a mean person. Other than these horrible acts I've done, I don't think of myself as having a mean nature. And I thought, this would be like the perfect time for him to elicit some sympathy on national TV. And the fact that he was so honest about that made me think.
Was he trying to get out of jail and move over to the mental health area, like an insane asylum of some kind for a different kind of treatment?
He really wasn't, because he had already been tested. He had had PET scans while he was in jail. He had had his brain tested multiple times. And as I would learn later, he actually is very comfortable in jail. And he doesn't mind being there. And he doesn't have any of the stressors that he had out on the street. But that's what really made me committed to getting to know him better, because that was so unlike the person that I had known briefly, however briefly. That was so unlike the young man that had left such a tremendous impression on me. And I was obsessed. Within a day or two, I wrote to him. I found out where he was. He was in Attica Correctional Facility. I wrote to him. I said, I don't know if you remember me. We covered that fight back in Brockport, and didn't hear a peep out of him. And I wrote him again about maybe a month later. And within like a week or two, I got a nice, lengthy letter from him, and he talked about what a formative experience it was for him, and he was impressed with me, and it was like the mutual admiration,
Gosh.
And I told him, I would love to. I've been doing some freelance writing, mostly about boxing at that point. But I said I'd love to get into crime. And
now, were you still at the police department?
I was still working for the PD. And I said, I'd love to just get to know you and rekindle. And I'm, from a forensic standpoint, I'm very interested in how this all happened. And I would really love to try to write a magazine article. And this was just kind of wishful thinking. I never a book still seemed kind of beyond my purview, but I threw it out there. And I said, and maybe even down the line, a book. And he said, sure. He says, yeah, come on up. Let's talk. So I went to see him in Attica first. He wound up getting transferred to another prison later. And the first time I went up there was I had actually I reached out to some people I knew in the publishing field, and I had I was able to secure a job with Details magazine.
Sure.
It's not around anymore.
Yeah, that was a good magazine.
Yeah, so they sent me up there with a photographer, a guy by the name of Chris Buck, who's very well known now today. And we did a great interview with him. Joel was so, I was concerned about how am I going to bring up. We're gonna have a
recollection and our reunion of our date together.
And how am I going to bring up
segue? Yeah, that's a tough segue. So we had this really great night, and then you went off and murdered 17 women. That's a tough segue. What's the tough one?
I didn't have to segue. He says, I know. He says, let's. I know why you're here.
Right.
So let's
get into it.
Yeah, and then we just got into it, and it was like a runaway train. And
I have to ask you a question, because one of the most disturbing. I grew up in a house you weren't allowed to watch television, and one of the nights I'm babysitting 2 little kids. My mistake. I watched television, and it's an interview with Barbara Walters, and it could have been Ted Bundy. It was somebody on death row. And I remember she said to him, "How did you get away with it?" And he looked at her and like came on to her on the camera. I've never been able to forget this visual. And he's like, "Barbara," he goes, "I'm a good-looking guy." He's like, people think guys like me have a sign across their head that says monster. That's just not the case, Barbara. You know that. And I remember watching, it terrified me. It definitely wrecked my dating years for many years because I backed up 15 steps near anyone. But how does that come out in someone?
Well, Joel didn't have that type of charm. He
No.
was a social he was socially inept. He was not particularly good looking.
So how did he get close enough?
Well, what he told me very openly and honestly and candidly, in some ways to the risk of him being embarrassed, but although nothing seemed to embarrass him, he said that he had this obsession with prostitutes.
Mm-hmm.
He had spent all of his money on prostitutes. That was really the only female relationships he ever had, other than one girlfriend in Brockport. But he had told me that even having relations with her, it was all like in the prostitute mode. It was all about him. It was over in 2 minutes, and so that relationship didn't last. Not just for that reason, but for other reasons as well. But what Joel said he did was he would purposely always select the most emaciated, the most emaciated. Even before he was started to kill them, he would always select the most helpless and emaciated-looking ones that he could find. Those were the ones that appealed to him the most. And then certainly when he started killing them, that was one woman that was a little more stout and hardy. Put up a fight and got away. She never reported it to police or anything. But apparently, years later, when he was captured, she came forward and said, "Yes, that guy tried to kill me, but I wrestled him off." But Joel said that one of the reasons he was so able to get away with it because he always selected the ones that looked the most physically helpless and the most drug-addled and emaciated.
Easiest to dominate physically.
So the fact that he's willing to admit all of these things that really don't bode well for his character made me think he was telling the truth. Not like that charmer that you just mentioned.
Right.
He's a manipulative guy. Joel really wasn't manipulative. He was just like this dopey-looking John that they probably figured, oh, I'll be done with this guy in 2 minutes.
And where was the satisfaction or the urge or the desire to say, okay, well, we just had sex, it was over in a minute, but now I'm going to kill you?
Well, Joel said that in 1973 is when he was born in 59. So in 1973, he was either 13 or 14. And he saw a movie called Frenzy, which was an Alfred Hitchcock movie. And it's about a serial killer, like an urbane, sophisticated in London, very good looking, very charming. And he's going around dating and killing women. And there was one scene in that movie where the man tied a knot in a tie, and they focused on the whole manipulation of the tie and prior to him putting it around the woman's neck and killing her in the movie. And for some reason, Joel said that scene stood out in him. That was like his first ever sexual imagery that just would not leave him. And so he said, by a couple of years later, he was starting to visit prostitutes when he was like 17, 18 years old. In his words, he saw probably 3,000 or 4,000 of them in his life. But he said every person he was with, every prostitute he was with, in order to enhance, or his words were jazz up the experience, meaning enhance the experience, he would utilize that fantasy, that vision from that movie. In every single one. So he always had this urge to do it. He never thought according to him, he never thought he would do it until he actually did it. But that was the fantasy he used to enhance, 3,000 experiences, and he only killed 17.
Only. That's a funny use of the word only. No, but
No,
I understand. Out of 3,000, you've interviewed a lot of criminals, and I want to keep going with this one, but I'm always fascinated. I cannot watch violent television. I don't even like reading violent books anymore. I used to go through my series. I used to try to read them to relax at night instead of some self-help book I'd read. And I'm like, this is not really making me relax. Do you think art, in your experience of interviewing criminals, do you think art imitates life or life imitates art?
I think you could make a strong argument for in either case. I don't think there's any hard and fast fact about that. I think it's like an even, depending on I could give you probably 20 examples of both sides. But speaking of art, Joel was a tremendous artist, and that was a hobby he learned from his mother. He was a terrific gardener.
And you said he liked his mother.
It's another. He was his photography passion was culled by his mother, and he did all these activities with his mother as a child because his he always felt like a failure in his father's eyes because he wasn't athletic, he was dyslexic, and he wasn't good at math, and his father was like this math genius and this with this engineering type mind, and so Joel was more of spent most of his time with his mother, and they had a seemingly phenomenal relationship. And he said, I never had any hatred for any of these women I killed. I just wanted to kill them, but it wasn't because of any personal animus. What I think led to that, whatever the motivation was, it was more just about powerlessness, and those were the type of people.
His powerlessness, or wanting to see someone be powerless.
Well, maybe
or is it both?
A little bit of both, because as a child he was bullied incessantly, and really brutal bullying, not just name calling. I mean, there was some really cruel things that were done to him by boys and girls. For example, coming home from school, he would be thrown to the ground. They made fun of the fact that he wore glasses. They made fun of the fact that they called him retarded, because back then, if you had dyslexia, nobody knew what it was. So they would call him the retard. They would shove underwear down into his throat and make him gag. But one thing that girls did to him, which might have, although he never told me that he derived a hatred towards these girls, even though they did a pretty cruel thing. He was on the yearbook committee. He used his photographic skills to work on the school yearbook, and it was with mostly girls, seniors. Yeah. And they treated him. So they treated me really great. Unlike most of the guys, or in this milieu, he said I was really treated with as an equal and as a partner. But then at the end of the whole preparation of the yearbook, they didn't invite him to the party. They had a little party, and he said that he was devastated. But more importantly, his mother, who was like oblivious to a lot of the other abuse that he put up with on a regular basis, she said that was the only time she recalls him being absolutely devastated emotionally. He wouldn't come out of his room, and he stayed in his room.
It's such a public humiliation. Yeah. I mean, those things in high school stand with you.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about, ironically, that we both went to the same high school. I still remember my 20th year high school reunion in June of whatever year it was. I bought a turtleneck. I had to go out and buy a turtleneck because right before it, I broke out in hives. June, I go in a turtleneck to my high school reunion. And then I had the best time ever and realized everyone was really nice and I had a blast. Yeah. But I'm walking around in the heat.
And everybody else probably had the same misgivings as you did.
But you're so impressionable. Oh my gosh, yeah.
But what was so powerful about that experience to me was the fact that was his mother finally noticed. He'd been going through this abuse for years.
Right.
And his mother said I could never understand. He would come home from school, he'd be panting because he'd be running away from these kids on his way home, or he would take these circuitous paths on the way home, or he would stay late to help with the teachers so he wouldn't have to leave with everybody else.
Okay, not to pick on his mother.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, no, I don't
But
want to.
no. I have to ask a question here because I don't want to pick on his mother.
Okay.
But I would think you have to be a pretty clueless mother to not not that you can necessarily solve something for someone, but to say the first time I noticed it was when he was in high school. Come on, I have 2 kids. You got to.
She had noticed it prior to that, but she said that was the one that really made her realize the level of intensity with these things.
Yeah.
But I tend to disagree with you a little bit about parenting, especially in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. Parents were pretty clueless back then. Mm-hmm. At least that's been my experience. I'm not going to go into anything right now that my parents didn't notice, but I found there was a lot of drug use back then, and I think if my children were doing drugs today, I would notice it immediately. I would like to think I would.
I think my father might have been, but my mother was on the pulse. There was not, you could have squeezed past that woman.
So, and she said, he would come home. He was always had his esoteric interests. He liked to play with little animals, and he liked his rocks. He had a rock
Was he
collection.
kind to those little animals?
Yeah. Oh, that's the other thing about Joel. He breaks all of the mores, everything, because he had no history of committing like senseless acts of vandalism. He had no history of torturing animals or stepping on bugs or shooting birds or playing with guns. He really, it's not like he morphed into this with the steady progression that we see with most serial killers.
Mm-hmm.
And
you've worked with other serial killers. You've done research in some other books.
I've worked with a lot of killers. As a private investigator now, I work in criminal defense. I work for a lot of criminal defense lawyers. I've known hundreds of killers, even on a personal level as a PI.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is there a theme?
Well, the ones I'm working with now, they're mostly like inner city kids or young people. Actually, there's some older ones too, but they're people that were raised in the inner city, which is a whole different creation than what like a suburban serial killer. Because the suburban serial killers, for the most part, usually have some degree of outward healthy home lives. The people that I'm dealing with in the city, maybe there's no father present, maybe the mother, or maybe they were born addicted to drugs, or they were raised by a grandmother, or their mother was in and out of jail, or their father was in and out of jail. Is one thing that I use in my business, because I'm also a clinical social worker, and I do what's called mitigation reports for the court, and my go-to thing with nearly all of my clients, regardless of their age, is what's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences, called the ACEs score, and a lot of the dysfunction in a family. A parent in jail, a parent on drugs, a sibling in jail, being born addicted to something, having to wean off something at a very young age, they all get like assigned a point. And then you add up the points and the ACEs score. And a guy like Joel, on paper, he was adopted, that could be an ACE score. It would be an ACE score. But other than that, he really wouldn't have tested that high on the ACEs score, as Ted Bundy probably wouldn't have tested high. He had I don't think Ted Bundy knew who his father was, but he had supposedly a doting grandmother, a loving mother. Maybe they were smothering, but they meant well.
Yeah.
And Joel's parents, by all accounts, his father would get frustrated with him, but his mother was a loving, doting woman. She had a master's degree from a university in Oklahoma. In the 1950s, there were not many people with master's degrees.
Right.
Not many women with master's degrees.
Just out of curiosity, this is one of those random questions that I told you might just pop into my head. Could you ever sit on a jury for a murderer?
There's certain people would probably love to have me on the jury.
Yeah.
I would think a lot of defense attorneys would think I'd be, if their case was a little shaky, they would probably view me being a former cop, but also, most former cops, they would never want on a murder trial. But the fact that I'm also a social worker,
It's an interesting background.
Makes me sort of an anomaly. So they would say, "Oh, maybe this guy could be open-minded," and the fact that I've worked.
Do you think you could be?
Oh, I think I could be. Sure,
you could be.
I would actually love to be on a murder trial.
Really?
Just as an aside, I was one of like 300 people that were called for jury duty. Probably 7 or 8 years ago. I don't remember, maybe less than that. And the judge was telling us, this is going to be a very long jury. A long trial. It's a very well-known person. Without saying a name, he was basically saying this is the first Harvey Weinstein trial. So even though it would have been very difficult for me professionally, because I'm self-employed, I could tell this is what it was. This was the Harvey Weinstein trial. So I stuck around as they were getting rid of 30, 40 people at a time. I was answering the question. I said to myself, I'm going to be committed. It'll take 5 or 6 weeks, but I would love to be on a trial like this if they would have me. But I never got to the point of being eliminated because it got to the point where I would have had to commit to like 6, 7 weeks, and I kind of chickened out. But I would have loved to be on a trial like that.
Having interviewed lots of killers, can you say these are things that tend to be personality traits versus these are not? Is there any way? Is there anything definable, or is it just like you're as different than I am as everyone else in this room, that's watching, or anyone we meet on the street? We're all just are different.
I think without equivocation, we're all different, and this is the example I always use, and I don't mean to be sleazy when I say this, but over the years in my PI business, we've had missing husbands, missing wives, missing young men or young women, and the parents or the spouse or whomever will give us access to some computer that person had access to before they disappeared. And I always say, you think you know somebody really well until you see the categories of pornography that they go log on to on their computer.
Wow.
And that's been like such a recurring theme in nearly all of these cases that I've investigated privately. Because when I was a detective back, I retired in 2003. There were everybody didn't have a laptop or a computer, or the internet really was in its infancy. But
so pornography and murder, or pornography and crime,
pornography or negative behavior or aberrant behavior, like people disappearing, people cutting out, people having a secret life.
See, that is so interesting, and we have to explore this parallel because, like I told you, I grew up with no TV. And when I was allowed to watch TV, it was Walt Disney, and the worst thing you saw on TV was maybe a soap opera with somebody smooching and maybe touching someone's back in a different way. Now, I see stuff online. I just freaking cannot believe what someone can turn on a television. And I don't think of myself as a prude. I've been around the block. I am just shocked with what is in people's living room. And when I think that I grew up babysitting people's kids, I mean, from age 10 till 18, I lived at people's houses taking care of their children. And when I think of what can get turned on a television in someone's living room with parents working like they're working, I'm sick. And then you see the rise in crimes where kids are doing things that are just mean, crazy, abhorrent behavior. And you say, what the heck's going on? And you just raised that very interesting parallel.
Well, for me, the parallel is, killing people is especially serial killing, is a very private thing. And what you view on social media, is a very private thing, or on the internet is a very private thing. So, there's people. I've had like a suburban businessman husband who checked out. His wife was in a panic. She thought maybe he faked his own death. She had no idea what happened to him, and his particular situation wasn't pornography per se, but what he liked to look at was beheadings.
Oh God!
In like the Middle East and people being hung, and after Nazi war criminals being hung, and there was like page after page of this type. So he had this fascination with death, and he wound up coming back. He disappeared for a couple of weeks, but he came back. But I interviewed him, and you never would have guessed if you had.
I can't imagine trying to sleep with someone like that once you find that out.
So if a person's obsessed with viewing that kind of behavior, is it that far of a reach to think maybe he's fantasizing about killing people too?
Yeah, and you said just a few minutes ago, you said social media, it's private, but to me, I mean, I have a large social media following, and I don't view it as private at all.
What I meant was...
No, I know what you
internet,
meant.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is how people feed into thinking, like the trend of, like, okay, I'll probably get all kinds of hate for this, but I've been canceled for posting the American flag, so I really don't give a damn. But, the trend of women, particularly my age, I mean, when I see a 20-year-old do it, I almost understand it's biology. But somebody my age walking on screen in their underwear. And, my first reaction is, would you freaking answer the door in your underwear? You are opening the door to the world. And that, to me, scares me. It scares me for those women. It scares me for the kids that are watching this. It's stuff that I is unfathomable to me in a lot of ways. And feeding that beast of what people look at in private. I mean, we're comparable in age. We look, snuck the National Geographic, if we were 10 years older, we probably would have snuck the Victoria's Secret catalog when it first came out, which was pretty tame, but, or the Sears Roebuck catalog, to see the women in their bras and underwear. It's a totally different scene now.
Yeah. And well, not only is it a totally different scene when it comes to things like that, but just think of the games that kids play, that even and adults are as addicted to these I've never played a video game in my life, but they're all about killing and blowing up, and it you just become so desensitized to that.
This is to me, when people talk about a gun, I could have 15 guns in front of me. Why I will never own one is because I'd be standing there talking to the criminal saying, listen, you don't want me to shoot you with this, which is the number one thing they tell you if you're ever going to get a gun, you better use it if you pull it out.
You better know how to use it.
And I wouldn't, although I like going with Tony to Tira, saying, no, and go to the shooting range. I have 3 bullseyes. So
good for you.
Yeah, because the target's not moving and it's standing like this close. But the desensitization, if that's a word, desensitization, I think it is, is frightening, because I can't believe you can be, a child that is so absorbing of things, watching pornography, watching all the killing that's going on, watching, and not just in the news, that's 24/7, 365 now, but the stuff on television in your living room on every single channel.
Right. When I was growing up, there was a boy my age in the neighborhood, and he had a BB gun,
Yeah.
and he loved shooting birds. He would shoot anything that moved, but except humans. But he loved shooting birds out of a tree, and he would cackle after he did it. And other than that proclivity that he had, he was, relatively normal. We all used to joke. We never reported him to our parents or anything, but we all used to joke that guy's going to be a serial killer someday. And that was even before. I think back then they were called mass killers. I think serial killer is kind of a newer word in the 70s. But we all thought this would have been the type of guy.
Well, one of my two brothers that I adore, who will go nameless because they'll both crack up if they ever watch this episode, one time shot a squirrel. Well, I can still remember the stink of the house because my mother made him eat the squirrel.
Oh, probably a great lesson.
And you know what? There was never another dead squirrel.
That was a great, great antidote.
Oh, yeah.
Your mother was very wise.
You killed it, you eat it. Yeah. That's our theory in life.
So Joel didn't fit the pattern of he was just a guy that didn't fit in, never would fit in, and that's what makes him unusual as an inmate for life. He's never going to get out of prison, but he has told me and unequivocally, I'm very happy here.
Do you still keep in touch?
I wish we did, but he kind of cut me off after about 10 years. I don't know why. I thought maybe...
Did he read your book?
I sent him the book, and he said that he read half of it. And he didn't say it was too painful, but I don't remember the exact word he used. But he says he never finished the book. Mm-hmm. But... He's in this special housing up at Clinton prison, so it's like where the sex offenders go, and the high profile inmate. Like if an officer, a police officer, was arrested and sentenced to jail, he might go to this special housing because it's where you're not going to be attacked apparently by other inmates, and so everything in the jail rotates around this facility, this small facility. And the guards there would tell me that they hated the special treatment that these inmates got. Because if one of them moved, like when I would go for a visit, just if Joel was going to be moved that day, the whole prison would have to shut down temporarily while they moved him because he's so high profile. But he has, it's like a big house next to this big prison. So the house looks small, but it's really kind of big. And there was like a Boy Scout leader was in there that had molested kids. So they're really like the worst of the worst that are going to be targets for others. But Joel gets to garden there. He has a garden, and he loves gardening. So he gets a tool to throw his dirt around. And he said that now that there's no, with all the medications he's on, all the antidepressants that he gets every day, he doesn't even have any sexual urges anymore. But this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to him in probably 10 years. So he says he's finally at peace. He doesn't feel like an outcast in this crowd with this crowd of notorious people. Nobody judges him. Nobody judges him as a madman. Nobody judges him as a perv. So he said that he's actually happier in this particular facility. If he was in the main population, he wouldn't be happy. But in this particular housing unit,
with the worst of the worst.
With the worst of the worst, he's very he's happier than he's ever been. And should not be released. He says I should not be released, and does not really want to be released. And he's born in '59, so he's 66 now. I'm sure he's got even more mellow as the time goes on. And one other thing that I think is very important about him is, in any other situation than him being a consumer of sex, if he was to encounter women under any other situation in a public domain, in a workplace, I don't think he would be any danger to them. I think he would be totally intimidated by them. For example, if you were working on the street and one of you bumped into the other and you turned around and snarled at him, watch where you're going, you idiot. I don't think he would have the ability to say or do anything. I think the only women he was able to hurt were the ones that he could be completely dominant over and get them into that dominant position, before he even, went into any of his antics. And he couldn't do that with anything other than a drug-addled, emaciated, 90-pound, crack-addicted prostitute.
I am always so frustrated when these interviews come to an end because, geez, I could talk to you for another 3 hours.
Yeah,
so will you come back again?
Joel's like an endless source. Yeah, I'll come back anytime. I can't believe 55 minutes has gone by.
I know.
We spoke earlier about how fast it goes.
Yeah. Your wealth of awareness and your psychology blended with, there's a lot of psychology to be a police officer. You've merged it all together in such an interesting way. I bet that really works very well for you in your private practice now of, working with people who would hire you for your expertise.
Yeah, it works very well with the mitigation reports.
Yeah.
And I've gotten so familiar, with the nuances of, mental health treatment for, not necessarily medications. That's not my forte. But very often, I take some notes and then I only started doing this about 2 or 3 weeks ago because people said, you have to try that ChatGPT. So I'll put my notes down or what I think would be a good summation for this person. And then very often the ChatGPT will say, very similar to what I wrote. So I'm very happy about that. I'm almost as smart as ChatGPT.
Well, Bob
Mladinich.
Bob Mladinich. This was really a fantastic interview. I enjoyed every second of it. Thank you very, very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
There are going to be all kinds of links below this. I'm going to address you. Thanks for listening, everybody. There are going to be all kinds of links below here for you to follow up with Bob Mladinich, and you can check out his books. You can follow what he's doing. You can get in touch with him. And I highly recommend it. And wow, I know I learned a lot and had a lot of insightful shifts of my perception on many different things during this episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, please hit subscribe, share this with your friends, and I look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Take care.